What I want to do initially, I think I forwarded you guys. Did I forward you the questions? So you see, there's like 10, basic background ones, and we'll go from there. But the very first one, I think, is tell me a little bit about your personal connection to Route 66 and how you got involved in preservation efforts. So if we want, Tommy, I guess we'll just go around and start with you.
Well, like I say, I grew up on 66. When I was a kid, first job I ever had was on 66.
What town was it?
Here in Springfield. They never managed to run me off yet. When I say my first real job, that was a root beer stand there on Kearney Street, and it was a real job because I paid federal, state, tax, and Social Security out of it. So I was 15, and like I said, I crossed it to go to grade school. That was before they had crossing guards, so to cross us there on Kearney Street to get to grade school, every morning and every evening there would be a policeman there.
Mm-hmm.
He'd stop traffic. In the nice weather, he would ride a motorcycle and stop. I mean, he'd be there on a motorcycle. And like I said, my grandmother lived on what's now East 24th Street at Weller, and she owned acreage in there, and they come through and put Kearney Street, 66, through in started in 35 and opened it in 36. And I mean, that is just part of your life. But when I was growing up, it wasn't unusual to have people, we lived a half a block off, come to the door and want food, people walking or however they were going. And I was just always interested in it, and that even before there was anybody around, in fact, I thought I was the only person in the world that was interested, and I saw an ad in Hemmings Motor News, and I wrote the fella, he wanted to know about maps, and I wrote him a letter and told him I'd be interested in buying a map or a series of maps or whatever he had. And it was Tom Snyder, not the TV guy. And he wrote me back and said, well, he didn't have the maps yet, just wondered if there was anybody interested. And I don't know how many people he heard from. But then when we started association here, this Jim Powell, why, he gave Powell my name, because Powell knew him, and that's kind of how I got hooked up with the association. But I've been collecting postcards and advertising pieces that were 66 a long time before that. I mean, I collected Springfield stuff, and then one day it dawned on me, this says Route 66. I need to go back and look at all my postcards and everything, and I did, and so I did duplicates, one for the 66 collection and one for the Springfield collection.
I'm going to interrupt. Why? Why suddenly were you so interested in Route 66?
The truth, I never watched the TV show. I didn't like it.
I didn't either.
I didn't care for it at all. But, well, it was just part of it. I rode my bike up and down it as a kid. When the new cars come out and they hauled them on the transports that had them covered with car covers, well, you'd go down there and sit there and wait for 3 or 4 of them to come by, and maybe a tire could be blown back. You'd see the back end or the front end or something of the cars. I mean, I guess that was my iPod. That was where I observed the world.
That's good. And so, the association, when did that start?
We started in the fall of '89 and got our charter in January of '90.
Okay.
And then July the 3rd of '91, the first historic sign was put up at the corner of Kearney and Glenstone out here, southeast corner. The association raised the money to pay for the signs, paid MoDOT at the time $76 a sign for the signs on the state right away. And then went to the communities and got 18.5 or 18.75 apiece for them for the off-system highways like St. Louis and College Street and such as that. And the signs to MoDOT was supposed to have been in perpetuity, but I found out perpetuity is only 10 years. Does not say that in the dictionary, but in the legal document, why, that was 10 years.
Tom, how did you get involved?
Well, I'm the new kid to this, so I've been working here. This is my 3rd year at Missouri State as Dean of Libraries, and when I first started here, we hadn't sold our house in Bloomington Normal, just west of Bloomington Normal. So I was driving back and forth every weekend. 6 hours no matter how you slice it. And I'd go up 44 to St. Louis. I figured out the beltway around the south side of St. Louis is the quickest way to get to Illinois. And then I got on 55, and I just do it every Friday night and every Sunday afternoon and evening. I have to come back the other way. So I did this for 7 months. And at some point during those 7 months, I would never listen to the, I hardly ever listen to the radio. I'd hardly ever, play music. I'd just sit there and think about, I had a new job, so I was just thinking about stuff. So Dave and I started having some conversations about, what's the future of academic libraries. And I think we both agree, and you can rebut if you want to, that it's in local history. That's what really an academic library ought to be focusing on, because Google's already scanned last time I checked, it was 25 million books. You don't scan 25 million books just for the fun of it. They're working through the legal problems, they're working with the publishers, probably a lot of it's not even on anybody's radar. They're going to come to every academic library pretty soon and say, we have a deal for you. We make arrangements with every major academic, every minor, every imaginable academic publisher. And you could, for pennies on the volume, you can have access to 30 million books. When that happens, what's going to be our differentiator? And it's going to be the local stuff. So we've been talking about Ozarks history, and it dawned on me, I think I was actually on 44. It dawned on me one day, I said, well, Route 66. And I came back and I talked to you about, we got to do this, and I think I already knew that Springfield was the birthplace of Route 66, and I got interested in John T. Woodruff. I'm actually working on that. It started as an article, but now it's going to be a book because it's sort of gone beyond article length. So for me, it's like Springfield's the birthplace of Route 66, April 30th, 1926. The telegram, for me, that is the birth moment. When they sent that telegram to D.C., and they were hanging on over Route 60, Highway 60, and with Kentucky, and the whole story. For me, that's why it's this iconic international thing now, but it's also intensely local. So both from the preservation side and from the economic development side and civic pride side, it's big.
So you came to it professionally, you never grew up on it?
No, I grew up in Northwest Iowa, so for me, the Lincoln Highway was the ribbon of concrete from coast to coast. I didn't grow up on my father grew up in DeWitt, Iowa, which was on the Lincoln Highway. So he used to tell stories about the hubbub they'd have when they were going to change the alignment like 3 blocks. They were going to go right downtown town. Oh, I was going to ruin the town, and everybody was up in arms about this realignment of Highway 30. So I sort of knew these major national roads and what they meant in the early 20th century to people, especially in the Midwest, I think. But I didn't know Route 66. It was just another road for me.
Dave, how did you?
Well, first of all, I will not rebut. Appreciate it. I agree with that. Local history is where it's at. My first time to really notice Route 66 was in 2001. We had won an award here for our labor archives. We have the Ozarks Labor Union Archives here. And there was an award that ceremony was going to be at the ALA meeting in San Francisco. And I've always wanted to do that trip out west without kids, without anybody, just myself, And so I asked the dean at the time, Karen Horning, she said, yeah, it's fine, just realize that we can't, reimburse the whole mileage, all that kind of stuff. So how about I rent a car and I'll just go? And she said, yeah, fine. So I did the trip on Route 66 on part of it. It was mostly, on I-40, but that was the first exposure. And I didn't think too much about it. I just said, that's pretty cool, it's kind of neat. I remembered one rest stop in Oklahoma that had Japanese graffiti on a tabletop. if maybe you've seen it too, but you can't miss it. It's at one of these little picnic tables on a rest stop, and it's well, that's kind of interesting. I guess Route 66 has some importance. So then fast forward about 6 years, David Dunaway comes over to Springfield, visits with us, does a survey of all the archives in Springfield to see what documents we have on Route 66. We have a few things, especially with the Teamsters and some other local history collections. Not a whole lot. But he says, you know what, Rolla's got an awful lot of information, but they have no space. You don't have a lot of information, but boy, you have a lot of space, because we had just come into this building around 2000, I think we moved in also in 2001. And in 2007, the National Park Service helped organize the Route 66 ARC, which is the Archival Research Consortium, or collaborative, I think. And once we were a member of that, we were committed. We decided, okay, we're going to start collecting. And we would work with Rolla, John. Before that, Mark Stauder was the other guy who joined us. And really, 2007 really started it, where we started documenting and having a plan to document 66.
So you also didn't grow up?
Did not grow up on it. No, not at all. No, I've been all
I
over.
used to rebut you though. You said we didn't have much of anything, but we house some of the archival materials of the History Museum on the Square.
Yeah. Well, we got that afterwards.
Oh,
yeah.
But we've got the typescript of John T. Woodruff's reminiscences of an Ozarkian, which I think is an important document.
There are important documents, but the bulk of it we do not have, in terms of, comparing what we have compared to others, we're small potatoes. But we got good stuff, those things.
Well, that's one of the questions, is how do you determine what you're going to preserve, collect, when it comes to Route 66?
Yeah, I think we have to be wide open on that. We have to, people think of postcards and photographs, okay? But there's business records that are out there. Oral histories are being collected on it. So that's an active, creative process of primary sources. I think photographs are good, but one of the things that we've recently put in a grant for a sort of a systematic photographing project. And it's modeled after one in Albuquerque that the University of New Mexico has been doing for 2 years. And that is, take the city limits, start on the east, and go along Route 66 and photograph every single thing on Route 66 with the best quality camera, best quality shots, even vacant lots. And then when you come across a structure that has some historic, importance, then you do close-ups, you do analysis of maybe the architecture and, sort of little artistic motifs that would be in there. But there's, that's a good question. What do you gather in terms of materials? And I think it has to be partly, you create that primary source in a way before it's gone, by interviewing people like Tommy or even younger folks.
That's what you know.
It's a Route 66 artifact.
That's right. And, but there's...
I have a project that I'd like to see built that, I don't know where we're going to get the money, but I'd like to see a national museum put here.
Yes.
And I'd like, if I can chime in, I think that also there's a need for, we'd probably, to get the funding would be the challenge, we'd probably have to call it a national research center, but it really would be an international research center.
With a museum.
Yeah, so it's...
Of each state.
Okay, and I was gonna, let's face it, there's politics involved in all this. When you
No.
Not at all. Among all your association folks.
Now, you won't watch this state, because a lot of them's killing herself, so. I don't know what's wrong with politics now.
And, and where things are going to be housed, and who's going to run the whole.
Hey, the beginning of Route 66 was political.
Yeah, it's been
I mean,
political
very
since,
political. They fought it for 15 months, and here they decided on 66. So, politics, and it's still, even city to city, to county, every election, you gotta go in and build your relationship again with the people in charge, and you've got a problem. If the guy running beat the incumbent, he isn't going to do anything if the incumbent thought it's a great idea, he thinks it's bad.
So how, again, playing devil's advocate, how can you even fathom that there's gonna be a national Route 66 museum where everybody is going to contribute, all the different associations, all the smaller.
It's just a dream, you know, I don't.
I think there's a need
I've
though, it's more than just a dream, there's a need for it.
I've pitched it to the National Park Service, and I was asked, because I was on that committee, why do you, well, we was at a meeting and they said, we've got no money. So they went around the table and asked everybody what they wanted. Well, everybody believed the no money story, but me, and I said, well, I'm sorry, you don't have any money, but I'm gonna tell you what I want and what I foresee. And the head out there in Santa Fe said, well, we said we didn't have any money. I said, I didn't hear you. We need a national museum. He said, why should we do it? And I said, because the National Park Service and your museums know how to archive stuff. You don't thumbtack it on the board on the wall where the evening sun, afternoon sun shines on it. I said, you know how to take care of stuff. And I said, I've got stuff that I would donate, but I'm not gonna let you thumbtack it on the wall somewhere in the morning sun or the afternoon sun. And he said, never had it said quite like that. I said, well, I'm just telling you how I feel about it. I don't know about these other people.
Was that Mike Taylor? Or Kaiser?
Well, no, it was their boss before.
Okay.
I mean, Michael Taylor was the head of it then.
Yeah.
And what was the guy's name? His son taught here at SMS, at his SMS at the time, and he moved here. I think he's moved someplace else now. I asked Aaron about him a time or two ago. I saw him, and he said, no, I believe I don't even remember where.
Just come back to the question you asked, Dave. So
Yeah.
in addition to deciding what to preserve, I think another interesting thing we've been working on is how to preserve it. So, you know, if you get experts and you get money, that's great. But we got this thing going with the National Trust for Historic Preservation to sort of crowdsource, keeping track of. So we're starting small. We're just doing, well, kind of small. It's just the motels and motor courts in Missouri. So it's about 365, as I recall. You know, so what we're trying to get people to do is we got to get that thing launched. I got to get it launched. But so if they, well, here's an example. So I'm driving down Kearney Street last week, and I know where Lurvey's motor court was, and I photographed it and stuff. All of a sudden, there's a sign saying that some Route 66 flea market's going to go up there. So that's what we need to have people on the ground, on the road, say, wow, something's happening here. You know, there's a wrecking crane out in front of this place, or it's going up for auction or something. And so we got to document sort of what's going on with these hotels, because they range from the Railhaven, which is still a going concern, to some of these classic motor courts are now kind of run down apartment complexes, sort of. And Lurvey's is really too far gone to salvage. There's trees growing up through the roofs of these cottages. So
It almost sounds like they're going to use the property for a swap meet or something.
yeah, and I tried calling, and her mailbox, voicemail box was full to find out what's going on with that.
I hope, see, they own that old drive-in ground. I hope they're thinking about that drive-in ground.
Well, the sign was right in front of Lurvey's.
Yeah, I went out there and looked at it and wrote the number down, and, you know, you just, like you say, her,
Voicemail.
yeah, it's full, so, you know, you don't get to leave a message. And I'm curious as to what it is, but I talked to, what's his first name? Griesmer.
Yeah.
With the city the other night, that guy Mace's museum out there. I said, hey, we got a little problem. If you want one of them buildings, you better get on a stick and start talking to somebody.
Yeah, there'll be landfill everywhere.
And he didn't know Rob Lurvey's name. He said, no, who Ralph was talking to, and he didn't know. And I said, well, don't talk to the two sisters Because I said, they'll go out there and bulldoze some cabins for you, because if you say anything about the property, they clear. They did the drive-in, took the screen down and everything. Guy called me wanting to rent it.
So my point is, you know, there's still a lot of people that are interested in the route and are traveling on the route, so if we sort of empower them to say, hey, you know, this is the state of this thing on this date, or then and now photographs, you know, we're married 50 years ago, we stayed here, and here we are on the 50th anniversary, staying here again, those kind of things.
Okay.
And it's kind of interesting to see what's being created now by younger individuals. You know, we're talking about college kids now traveling the route and creating YouTube videos of that experience. There's a guy out of New York, he's a photographer, he does photography of rave parties, you know, these big things. His name is Nate Igor Smith, and he recently did a photograph, the journey of him taking nude models with him along Route 66 and posing them in front of iconic Route 66 features. And you're like, wow, that's really interesting. Buy the book. Turns out it's a limited edition. You only sign so many of them. He's an artist, all that kind of stuff. And you had to get it on Etsy, you know, one of those art, you know, buying sites.
Did you get a copy?
I got a copy. You got it. Yeah, you
You
bet.
shared it with us.
You bet.
He probably can't tell us what's behind the models.
Exactly. No, well, no, I can't, except for one. He did have one of the young women pose in front of the Lily Tulip Cup over there.
Which is gone.
Which is gone, exactly.
This
And
spring.
why did they tear that off? Because that entrance now is ugly.
Yes.
I know.
Yes. But you see, he was on that trip. He's probably one of the last ones to take a photograph of that, and it just so happens there's a cute girl with her pants down. You know.
That's going to renew interest in Route 66.
Yes.
But that's the point, though, is
Yeah.
that this
Yep.
is changing, and now, you know, Woodruff Building is gonna be called Sky 11.
Yeah.
They're changing the name of
Yes.
the Woodruff Building?
Yes, it's the only thing
Now,
he named.
why would you go do that?
This is gonna be your oral history interview from hell.
I think because we're gonna, well, but that's just it, is that you have put 3 people in a room, you're all gonna have very different
What's
ideas
wrong
of
with
what.
the name of a building that's been there since 1910? It's
Yeah.
over 100 years old.
I know. It doesn't appeal to the.
Where's the
That's right.
mindset in this country? They gotta screw something up to fix it.
Well, okay,
Well, all we're missing are some beers.
We got water in
Yeah,
there. Might be Everton. You never
that
know.
don't help.
well, okay, so I'll throw this out. What do you think is in most need of preservation right now in this sector? If we're talking your area, what
The
is?
whole road, I will tell you, the #1 priority is
Yeah.
the road and the bridges, because they just shut the bridge east of Lebanon.
You mean the road itself?
The
actual-
road itself, progress to the west side of Springfield. They moved it over 300 feet so you could go back down on 66 and turn to go to the new airport terminal. Now, and I asked the engineer, can you explain to me the thinking of that? What made that better?
Oh, I can tell you that. Now it's developable on both sides of that boulevard. So we could, you know, they had big visions there.
Let me throw something out. The people that owned that Goodyear place down there, I went to the meeting, and they were all mad and it's gonna hang them MoDOT guys. I mean, really, I thought that's what's gonna happen, and the guy from the airport walked in and said, in fact, it was kind of shocking when he showed up, because he had on black leather and he rode in a big old Harley and everything, and I was going, Hell's Angels was getting involved in this. And he walked in, he was the head of the airport, and he said, you can't develop this property. Well, we can put hotels out here. I said, no, you can't. Can't be done. And they said, well, when we bought it, and the other people, the golf course and all, said they told us we could develop that. He said, they never told you the whole story. Nothing can be higher than, I don't remember the exact figure, 35 or 37 feet. A 2-story motel won't fit in this because you're within a quarter of a mile. He gave the footage, 1,500 feet of the longest runway at the airport. So the FAA will not let you develop this. That's why on this side, they don't have any two-story houses. They're all on the other side of 44 because it's just across. And if you look at that, that's the deal. But they couldn't tell me why they need to move the road. And that was,
So you're arguing for the actual infrastructure itself, bridges?
hey, if the road goes away, you've got nothing.
So how are you gonna preserve the road?
Oh,
You're
I
gonna
talk
shovel
to
back the
MoDOT
original
every-
road bed?
I talk to MoDOT every week. I mean, that's the first thing. Somebody has to create a dialogue with your Department of Transportation. From being in contact with other associations, ours, we're the only state that has an agreement with MoDOT for the signs. Done that.
You pay for them and they'll let you put them up, is that the?
Now, these new blue signs, no. MoDOT and the association got a federal highway grant, put them up $388,000. And MoDOT wanted blues. I wanted to throw up when they told me that, but because blues are byway sign, or byway color.
What did you want?
Huh?
What did you want?
I thought the brown looked good, but after they put the blue ones up, the brown ones get lost in the background. In the fall and in the spring, they just blend too good. The blue ones don't, they stand out. But anyway, we have a working agreement with MoDOT, and I've got a couple of contacts. And there was an issue come up, the gentleman wasn't happy with something, and the guy at MoDOT called me and he said, explained the situation. He said, now what's your take on it? I said, well, let's talk about it. And we talked about it. And he said, well, what do you think we'll do? And I said, tell him forget it as far as I'm concerned, that I don't see doing what he's wanting done. He said, well, we need to work together on this. And he said, we'll take the lead and we have your support. And I said, yes, you do. He said, I'll just tell him forget it, it's a bad idea.
So build on Tommy's thought, I think that what has to be preserved is the opportunity to have the experience that people had on Route 66 in a way that's not phonified.
Yeah.
Not phony.
So an authentic experience.
The opportunity to have an authentic experience. So
Yes,
partly
I agree with
is to
that.
get to the 8 states departments of transportation and say, this is a special road now. Not that it has to be, you just can't think about it in terms of, oh, when I-44 is closed, you gotta have this. I mean, that's a good argument, but you gotta.
It's a legitimate argument.
Yeah, but you gotta get to them thinking that this road is not just part of your transportation infrastructure any longer. It needs to be, we need to preserve that experience so that people have that experience.
Okay, and now I'm gonna poke and prod you a little.
Yeah.
What is, in your mind, what is an authentic?
Okay. Okay, I'll give you, I'll give my answer, I'll go see.
Do you wanna check
I'll see in
first?
just a second.
Okay,
But-
what is this
okay,
authentic
here's a
experience?
for instance.
Yeah.
So I had to go out to Phoenix, Arizona, February. And I'm thinking like Dave Bridges, which is dangerous, but I'm thinking like Dave Bridges. And, I started looking at airline flights, and it was like 3 weeks out, and it was like $900 and 9 hours gate to gate to get to Phoenix. I can drive it, I can do the Google Maps, I can drive it in 18 hours, and I can go down the Route 66 corridor to Holbrook, Arizona, then I cut across country and down to Phoenix. So I'm doing this, and I tell Dave I'm gonna do this, and he says, make sure you get off I-40 at Glen Rio, it's either Texas or New Mexico, it's right on the border.
It's on the line.
So I get off, and I take a photograph, send it to him to just document that I was there. And I'm thinking, I gotta get to Phoenix, and so I can't spend a lot of time, I'm gonna have to, someday I'll be able to do it slow and stop at every place. And I think I'm gonna take 66 west from Glen Rio. Well, about a quarter mile from this ghost town, it turns into gravel. I'm like, oh man, and there's no signage whatsoever. And so I'm thinking, well, if the Jodes had been real, they would have gone right here. They would have been traveling right here. So then I can't, I'm kind of keep my eye on 40. I can see the truck traffic off on the horizon there. And all of a sudden, I starting to come to wide turns and stuff. I don't know which way. I think I'll go right here, And then I'm like 10, 15 miles out in the middle of nowhere. And eastern New Mexico, and suddenly I come to the next town, I can't remember what it is, and I didn't been about 40 because it wasn't marked, it was just, I was out there and, you know, there was nothing, there wasn't even cattle anyhow out there, you know. But that was a real experience.
Fear and desolation.
Fear and abandonment is, you know,
Yeah.
what if our car breaks
Just
down?
west of there, there's an abandoned bridge.
Yeah,
And you, I mean, you know, and you get to driving that, and you think, well, now this is,
yeah.
you know, it's neat, you know, if
Yeah.
you know.
So the uncertainty.
Yeah,
If
because
I'm hearing it,
It's an adventure.
But the thing is, adventure and travel, but I'd hate to see it become, you know, sometimes we talk about what we need is like an elongated Williamsburg. Well, not really, because you don't want it to be like phony baloney. No offense to Williamsburg, but it's not a 21st century thaw, early 20th century motor trip.
Well, what you gotta keep in mind, 66, the one thing that has been the same from the very beginning is change. And people start saying, well, we need to preserve this 1930s building. We need to preserve this. And then anything in the 50s, they just kind of, and I said, 66 evolved over from 26 to actually 85's when they officially decommissioned it. There were still sections in the deal here in Missouri. But there were businesses and things of significance through all that. So I asked people, well, what era do you preserve? You don't just draw out 1950 and say, well, it's got to be 50 or before, or what happened in the end of World War II, and we'll preserve that, and the heck with the rest of it. Plus, as you drive across this state, if you're going to drive out of St. Louis on 66, you have to take Manchester Road, which is 100, the first alignment. Some people come out, Gravois and Watson, out to Lindbergh and all of that, then they go to the interstate to go to the state park. But when you go across this whole state, you can drive all of it except up there at Arlington, just west of Raleigh. There at Arlington, there is no 66 left there, so you've got to go to the interstate.
But I'm going to point out something to you. You're contradicting yourself a little bit. Because you're saying Route 66 has always been about change and evolution, and yet just a few minutes ago you were lamenting that they wanted to change, they changed the name of
The Woodruff Building.
the building.
Back in
It comes
the
down to
day-
what do you know,
In the
to you that's
days,
sacrilegious,
in
it
the
sounds like a change.
days of 66. Plus, you say you're writing a book about Woodruff.
I'm working on one, yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I tried to get Susan Kelly Kirkpatrick to write one about him or the group of men that was involved in 66
Yeah.
with Avery. Avery didn't do that by himself.
Yeah,
But anyway, when I'm talking about change, it was the road. Because they would bypass, you was talking about, well, they're gonna move Lincoln Highway 3 blocks or something. They changed, shortened the distance and everything. And that was done, you know, back, a lot of towns died because they bypassed it. They made it easier to get across and quicker to get across and such as that. That just, evolution took care of that of 66. Now they're just going in and doing stuff like this road out here. All it had done is widened the original alignment in there for a quarter of a mile or 2/3. That, I mean, I couldn't see just setting that road over 300 feet just for the heck of it, you know. When they had basically the same thing right there. I'm not against if it's something, I don't like seeing them just go in and just hack it up. And there are places that's trying to do that.
that's
They're
what I'm
trying
saying,
to-
it ought to get some sort of special status. If we get all 8 states to
Well,
agree that there's,
I'll
this is a
tell you
special.
now, the meeting we're wanting to have here, that's one thing the Park Service, and you don't have to put this out yet. They're wanting to make it a national trail.
Which gives it some protection.
Well, I don't know how much protection. We thought that going to the National Scenic Byway for everybody in Texas would work, but the government hadn't. You mentioned politics.
Mhm.
See, we get involved with a lot of stuff politically that we need to take care of the grassroots some stuff before we start worrying about a lot of other stuff.
The other thing I gotta say though, is it's a largely untapped economic potential for these 8 states in this country, you know?
And the communities.
All the communities, that Rutgers studies found that it was 17 to 20% of people that are doing Route 66 now are affluent, retired Europeans, basically. And my wife ran into a couple of British gentlemen in a grocery store. And when she found out they were doing Route 66, they said, yeah, it's great, but they were like the British equivalent of Navy SEALs.
Mhm.
These guys are retired Navy SEAls for the Brits. And they said, we're having a hard time finding where to go. Where's the alignment, you know? That's why we got that guy Mace to get those sides, you know, he said he'd do it, but he'd fund it. But to get the, you know, so when you're driving, you say, oh, this is it, you know?
Mhm.
Somehow they got, you know, this is the route.
That's the problem. They steal the signs.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they do.
Yeah.
They steal they stole the brown ones right and left, and they steal the blue ones. I mean, you can put, for example, from Halltown to Carthage, they put them up. This MoDOT did. 2 days later, they were all gone. The post they were wood, 4-inch wood posts.
Yeah.
Somebody come through there and cut them off about that.
Oh, I just interviewed a woman at the Route 66 park there, and
Times
she's,
Beach.
yeah, and she said, she goes, just look for the Z. She goes, so many signs are stealing now, they're putting up little signs with the Z to designate, follow the Z signs for Route 66.
Oh, the way to.
In a way to prevent,
Oh.
yeah, the theft.
You have to know.
You have to know, yeah.
You know, that's interesting, that's an indicator as to how popular the route is, that people like stealing the signs.
Yeah, but it comes, you know, I want to come back to what you were saying about the international component of this. You know, you talk about preservation.
Right.
Is the preservation going to come from within, domestically? Are we going to see enough younger people, my kids, your kids, wanting to travel Route 66 to preserve this and infuse it with, you know, some economic development? Or, like everything else, is globalization really going to contribute to the preservation? Do we need the money of the wealthier Europeans and the Chinese and the Australians
So we need to broaden our base.
I can
but-
you know, and market it to them?
Since '08, and the big bubble burst in this country, if it had not been for the foreign tourist, Route 66 would have starved to death. They're the ones that paved the way. Now, you go back and you've got a group, I won't say group, but you've got people on 66 that don't like the motels being owned by foreign interests. And you've got people that don't like the foreign tourist. And a year ago, they had that festival at Joplin, and there was a woman that has a business, and she was there, and she gave vent to this. We had a meeting, and she said, well, I wish the foreign tourists would quit coming over here. Well, I've got a problem. I can't let something like that go unchallenged. So we was going around the room and they asked me to speak, and I said, I just heard a statement here that I do not agree with. It was just said by a party that they wished the foreign tourists would quit coming here. I wish more domestic tourists would travel it, but let me remind you, in the last 4 years, you would have starved to death if it had not been for the foreign tourists. Her business is closed now, and she's moved on. You know, You have to be careful what you say, because you may be biting the hand that's feeding you.
I mean, that's the thing though, that, the National Park Service, I think they get it, but they need to realize that, I challenge you, go anywhere in the world and list 3 highways. One of them 66, I don't even know what the other 2 would be. 66 is going to win in terms of worldwide recognition, name recognition. And we got to tap into that.
Well,
And that's a whole other, a whole other issue is what are the associations doing, to market it to the international community?
well, I'll say all we can.
Lederhosen is the answer. Lederhosen, we're going to get some Lederhosen.
Well, here's the deal. All of the associations is like ours. We're dues driven. We don't have any money making deal. That's where you're in trouble. We don't even, our publication is not even funded by, we don't get any money from the state. Illinois gets some for theirs, and so does Oklahoma, travel guide. So you're in trouble. I mean, our dues pays for our magazine and everything, and we sell ads in it, and that, that's about as simple as it gets. And that's the problem we face, is I tell them that the Park Service and everything, whatever project you go to do, the first ingredient, main ingredient, is money. And you've got to have that or you're just dead in the water.
One of the things that it's kind of tying into this discussion about why do we preserve it? Is it because of the nostalgia, or is it because of economic development? Is it because of the experience? Is it because there's international travelers on it as well as domestic? Some of these things were talked about at that World Monuments Fund conference. And I don't know if anybody's talked to you about that. It took place in Anaheim in November of 2013. It was basically a conference that was put together after the Rutgers study. And that was a fascinating conference. And we'll try and put you in touch with some sources or documents that came out of that. I know there were notes that were taken at the meeting, and maybe even, I think it was videotaped too.
Yeah.
But that conference talked about, maybe these associations aren't able to do a lot, or they try to do as much as they can, but there are a significant number of small businesses that are taking advantage of it. There's motorcycle rental places in Chicago that are specifically targeting the Brits, the Germans, the Czechs now, because the Czechs have a Route 66 association. And in fact, the president of the Czech Association gave a talk at the Route 66 Anaheim conference, and he was the first one to get a standing ovation from his presentation. Absolutely incredible what he was doing. But it's almost like the international community recognizes more than the U.S. community the supposed importance of Route 66. And I think it goes back to something we started talking about earlier, that myth, that mythology. The president of the Czech Association kind of put it together kind of succinctly. He said, when I was growing up and my parents were growing up, we lived under communist rule. We could only, travel with a pass, from city to city and just try to get outside the borders. Whereas Route 66 is going through all 11 states, going through incredible geographic and geological landforms. And the other thing too, the trip going from Chicago, going into Missouri, you're hitting the hills, then you go into the red clay of Oklahoma, New Mexico, or Texas and New Mexico. Every time, I was telling this to Tom before he went, I said, it's incredible. It's like a spiritual, journey with each of these. If that's the first time, it gets better and better and better, And finally you get to the pier. And it's something that these people are, and it is, it's about the myth. I think, there's something about journeying on this ribbon of road that has had different experiences for different people. And I love the studies that we're doing with the African American community. New Mexico's doing it for the Native American. What's the Native American experience of Route 66? It's, well, you told us we couldn't have this land anymore, so we could build a road, or we have tourist spots, or, yeah, we want you to dress up and dance around as Indians in these costumes. You know, and in some cases, it's insulting, you know. But for most folks, it's a positive experience, it seems like.
Okay, but again, I'm gonna play devil's advocate, you know, we use this term myth making. How much of this is authentic, you know, we talk about authentic, the search for authenticity here.
Right.
And yet, we're playing up certain stereotypes, certain, you know, certain aspects of this to provide that experience, you know, that experience to
That's true with
the
everything.
traveler.
First time I went to Yankee Stadium, I thought, oh, I'm going to Yankee Stadium. I had a terrible seat, it was a terrible, you know. It was as an experience, if I didn't know I was in Yankee Stadium, I said, this was a terrible, I wasted my money to go see this baseball game in this stadium, but it was going to Yankee Stadium.
See, to me, that being the sociologist in me says, the interesting study would be do a pre and post little study. What do you expect? And that's, I've got a small grant to do this next year, to go on with travel coaches, international travel coaches, to find out, A, what are these tour operators pointing out is this is important. This is what you ought to see, should
Pay
see.
attention.
And versus a post, and then are they set at the end? You know, their expectations before versus the reality and the
But they come
experience.
in with
after.
expectations.
They come in, and that's what I want to look at is how are we marketing this?
What you want to go from, 66 went in the beginning from being a road of travel. Now it is a destination.
You're saying it was used to get from point A to B, but now
When
it's.
it was built, it was transportation, people used it. Now it is the destination. It is 2,400 mile Disneyland or Six Flags or whatever. It's it's a slice through the heart of this country. It's not Williamsburg, it's not Washington DC, it's not New York City, it's right through the heart where this country actually is. You follow what I'm saying?
I can tell you,
The foreign tourists come, you meet those foreign tourists, and my daughter worked at the Railhaven, and I went out and talked to a lot of these people. There's not a whole lot of difference in a Norwegian than an American. I mean, our outlooks are the same, and we probably would get along fine. It's our governments that's keeping people stirred.
Yeah. And back to Tommy's point, though, that I think part of the big problem is, I think it is a global, I would suggest, you know, my working hypothesis is that this is the most recognized highway in the world. So you got this global awareness.
Modern highway.
Myth,
Mhm.
I'd say, you know, Appian Way.
Yeah,
Go ask some kid.
Yeah, that's the
Go ask some
Roman.
kid in Bangladesh, what's the Appian Way mean to you? They're gonna look at you like blank stick. You say Highway 66, Route 66, oh, yeah. Okay, so, I mean, that's just my working hypothesis. But it gets down to local politics, local governance, you know. That guy who put up the little thing on Santa Monica Pier that's so bigger than that pillar, the story he told about the fight he had to go through, and they're like, who wants to do that, you know?
Talk to anybody in Seligman
Yeah.
about the Dalgadillo family and the animosity that you see.
I mean, so it's like, you know, you got this global thing, and then it all boils down to local politics and building codes and, you know.
And there are no, well, even in Springfield, building codes. If you went in and went to restore a building, you'd still have to bring it up to current standards, period. They're not going to catch any slack because it's a 66 or it's an old building. I mean, that's the way it's always been.
But, you know, okay, we're just saying they're coming over here, they want this authentic experience, and you're talking about Disneyland or Colonial Williamsburg, and I would argue that certain parts of the road are turning into, look at Seligman. Okay, if you lose Angel, Delgadillo, okay, from there, what does that town become? You know, White Wallace is always saying, oh, the road is about the people, the people, the people. And once the people, they're all gray, they're all getting old, they're all dying.
Right.
Who is, and it comes back to Dave, what you're saying, where are the young people coming in to step in and carry on this, either either preserve the stuff that's there or create new places and new businesses. It portends, when I think about this, what is going to be the future 10 years from now, 20 years from now? I'm going to say this for the record. I'm not as optimistic as I think a lot of you guys that, this is going to be...
No, I'm not optimistic because we've had two things happen since the first of the year here that I think has set the road back. Now, Gary Turner out here at west of Halltown passed away. He had the gate burrito. He built back a station like the one that was there in Burton 55. And the people came and he sold t-shirts and stuff and probably gave away as many as he sold. But there's people like that. Well, I was talking to a woman, what day it was? Friday, Thursday. And she said, Paul was over here at CDB, and she said, we're going to go out there and Gary's going to cook dinner for us. And I said, no, Gary ain't going to cook you nothing because he died the last day of January. She said, well, but his son's going to keep it open. Well, I've talked to the family. They all work. You can't be there from sun up till sunset. They can't because they're working for a living. But anyway, and then Scott Cameron up there east of Lebanon, there Mr. C's Cola died. And it changes, and like you're talking about, that's what I was talking about the road. Every day is a battle because some community or something changes on 66. An icon leaves the road, they tear it down or whatever. Stuff like that you can kind of argue your case with. Somebody dropped them dead, there's nothing you can do about that. They're gone, and Delgadillo, when he goes, you won't be getting an $85 haircut anymore.
But,
I think that's a very good point that the demographics for domestic tourism for the road and for economic development, that traditional senior citizen white demographic is going to be passing away. And one of the things they've been discussing is how do we then keep it going? Even the international travelers are usually older that are coming over. And so there was this focus on trying to do some diversity in two different areas. Ethnic diversity, such as trying to see, because if you look at the record study too, it's primarily white folks that are journeying for investigation purposes. So can we improve that by, finding out what the shared experiences were for others, Hispanics, African Americans, and Native Americans. The second is the age. The only significant hope that we saw in recent years for sort of a younger resurgence was due to a Hollywood film, Pixar's Cars. And there are some folks that are thinking that there's a generation gap. Once the kids started watching Cars, that generation that watched that hit movie became more interested in Route 66 than two prior generations before them. Okay, it's like they had something to share with grandma and grandpa rather than their parents or their older brothers or whatever. And that seems to be the interest that we're seeing now. Now Cars, we actually looked into that. When was Cars produced? But those students are now about ready to enter or are entering college right now. And that's, a colleague of mine at Northern Arizona University, Sean Evans, he and I had an email conversation on, are we seeing more young people going on Route 66? When I say young, people are in their early 20s to mid 20s. And he seems to think that they've been doing it for quite a while. I'm trying to think to myself, I'm not sure, maybe I'm just out of touch with that, but I think it's increasing. There's like a slight uptick in the last 4 or 5 years as those kids who watch Cars are now going to college, and then they have some free time and they go travel the group. They do short sections of it, they don't have the time, because that's the other problem. This is a retirees type of destination. You need a couple of weeks, you can't just do it on a weekend, you know? And so that kind of inhibits the experience itself. So you almost go.
No, because what you hit upon, and this has always bothered me, again, the sociologist in me, we like to be systematic and empirical. And one of the things, the Rutgers study, important, but as you're pointing out, we have all these impressions.
Exactly.
Oh, we think more young people are getting involved in this. I've never understood why along the route, they have those little guest books or those little, why you don't ask a little more, other than just your name and your, where you're coming from, a little more demographic information here. It bothers me, and you ask some of that. I've interviewed many a business owner. Oh, do you ever go through your books systematically to at the end of the year, check out, okay, 22% from the Netherlands, or,
Right.
They say, well, we just throw them in they're there, they're in a drawer, they're in a.
Well, I've preached for years, if we don't get the kids interested in this, we might as well forget it, because you look around any group, even our association, and they're old,
Do you have any 20-somethings? Do you have any 20 or 30-year-olds?
We have some younger members. I don't know if we've got 20-somethings. We have, things. I go about 3 times a year out here. There's 2 or 3 teachers that teaches the deal on 66. And I go to the class and talk to them and such as that. And year ago, there was a kid, and his folks traveled 66. This kid was sharp as a tack. I mean, he was sharp. And he was upset because they got to the Grand Canyon when they had the government shut down. And he was mad at the park ranger because he wouldn't let him in. And he said, that guy in that hat wouldn't let us in. And the teacher said, the government shut down. And he was just mad. And I said, don't be mad at him. And he wouldn't let us in. I said, that was his job, not to let you in. I said, if you want to be mad at somebody, be mad at the 500 people in Washington, D.C. that shut the government down for you. And he said, what do you mean? I said, Congress, the president, and everybody. I said, a bunch of adults couldn't come to an answer to keep the government running, and that guy was doing what he was told to do. He'd have let you in.
John, I gotta go.
Yep.
So, would you close up? So, I want to answer your final question.
Yes, thank you.
What is the one message or piece of advice that you would like to give to travelers on Route 66? This is my answer. Springfield, Missouri is the birthplace of Route 66. And I wish I didn't have to tell every traveler that. I wish that they knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, when they came through Springfield, that this was the birthplace. I wish there was a place that they could jump out, take a photo shoot, and send it to all their relatives and friends immediately. I was at the birthplace of Route 66, which is now, actually I'm working on this book about Woodruff. There's some, where did that meeting occur? It might have occurred at the Colonial Hotel. It might have occurred across from the Woodruff building in his office on the 8th floor. I think my working is it occurred in the Colonial Hotel because that's where the telegram was sent from.
Okay. It was sent from the Postal Telegraph at the Colonial Hotel.
Exactly.
Now then,
there was a Western Union across the street.
Now let me give you the rest of it. They have the first president of our association, Lucille Moore Sutton, wrote 50 years ago today. Her great niece is Susan Kelly Kirkpatrick. Anyway, in 1976, every Sunday she'd put this in the paper, and she had a deal about the meeting in Springfield that determined the Route 66. I mentioned that to the president, and he hooted at me. He said, why, that'd have been in St. Louis, and who would have met in Springfield, Missouri? One of the women, or a woman there, Beverly Beverly Fleming was her name, worked for DNR. About 3 weeks later, I got a letter and copies of the meal tickets
Do you still have those?
somewhere in all of my stuff, but they've got it at DNR.
Who got reimbursed for their lunches?
Who got reimbursed for their lunch was Meyer from Missouri and all. There was not one for Woodruff. I told John Sellers, then there's the question mark. Was he at the meeting?
Was he
But
there?
Woodruff Sellers says, think about this. I believe he was there. He owned the Colonial Hotel. He wouldn't have paid for a meal at the Colonial Hotel because he owned it.
Yeah.
I said, all right, that sounds good, is it?
But I think there's, so I think that they should know that this was the birthplace.
How are they going to know? You need to designate something.
Exactly.
You need to have some sort of, at this place.
There's gotta be something.
Well, there's a plaque.
There's a
up
plaque,
there
but
on the
good
square.
luck, if you find
Well,
that
you
plaque.
gotta know where it's at, fine.
I'll buy you a dinner
But
if you find that plaque.
In your book, you will find it, I mean, you will write
Let me go
this.
get my son.
Yeah.
Woodruff
Take a little
was
break,
the
yeah.
first president of the Route 66 Association that they're claiming was Cyrus Avery's deal. And that meeting was held here in Springfield in 27 April, I think.
The articles of incorporation are in the Greene County Archives. I've
That
seen it.
is that archives on Boonville Street is one of the biggest assets.
Yeah.
In fact, Robert Newman called me down there one day, and said, you gotta come down here. And I said, what for? And he said, the world's #1 authority on Wild Bill Hickok's here. To see his signature for some court case he was involved in. I went down there and a guy from England was down there, and he's the world's authority.
So that's the one thing I want
Okay.
travelers to know. Pleasure meeting you. I've got
Hey, we'll be in touch.
skating trumps everything.
Oh, I know.
See ya.
There you go.
My kid's out there, so
All
you
right.
But you have to you have younger generation, but you just talk what keeps it going, all right? Dave mentioned this. Grandparents is taking kids on 66. That's creating the memories that the grandparents had when they traveled with their folks on 66. That will make as the kids get older, they will want to go back and travel it again.
But is there enough of that going on? Again, I would argue, okay, we
You'd
hear
be
the story here and
surprised
there.
how many people, maybe they aren't taking them from Chicago to LA, maybe Easter weekend. They're getting the grandkids and they're going out and they're driving from St. Louis to Joplin, or they're driving from Springfield to Tulsa, or something like that.
Well, again, by doing it personally, through the media, or, as you said, movies and cultural depictions, maybe, but, how do you measure this? How do you know the effects of this?
Right.
And
The only way, I think the Rutgers is the last sort of systematic study that had numbers to it. And it's got its flaws. I mean, it was a, volunteer survey.
yeah.
But it was, that's got the best data that we have so far, but we also are seeing some of these little projects that are popping up from time to time, like the motel project that Tom's doing. And I think too, what we're touching on is trying to capture Route 66 right now. There's sort of this understanding that, well, we're not sure. We bring up some good questions, so maybe we need to document the whole thing in one fell swoop in terms of, well, at least this project might be systematic. This oral history project will be focused on this topic in this moment in time, or this photographic survey that we're hoping to get funded, or what New Mexico's doing. What's nice is that New Mexico recognizes that we're going to take a picture of every structure on Route 66, even if it's the McDonald's that was built 2 years ago, because 50 years from now, we don't know. It's going to be a historical building.
Exactly.
But, and tying this into what the future of Route 66 is, I think there's some really good questions there, and I think the World Monuments Fund meeting has set at least the ball rolling for some of these state associations to meet and to have some sort of voice, at least, and Tommy can speak more to this because he was at the second day of the conference where they talked about, okay, now what we're going to do in terms of action items. But I don't see Route 66 growing in terms of a destination unless we can draw in those different factors that were brought in. The preservation, the destination, the economic development, using that myth of the road as a drawing card. But you could also use it, you know, the road, the facts of the road are kind of sobering right now. I mean, you go to certain parts where the road goes in, they're pretty crime-ridden. In fact, they talked about in New Mexico, the photographer that did their project, she realized she couldn't go to certain areas on Route 66 alone, and at certain times of the day. So they realized that someone else had to go with her. So it was always two people. And in some cases, the neighborhoods would be questioning, you know, the owners of the homes would be like, why are you taking a picture of my house? You know, they would come out and confront her, you know. So you need credentialing for that to happen. But yeah, I don't know. The road is, again, it's one of these things that I think it's going to have, eventually, I don't think you can do, you know, a theme park from Chicago to LA. But I think you can possibly establish some snapshots of that iconic highway along the road and have some of it as sort of a living, breathing historical corridor too.
Okay. That meeting, I wanted to just ask a follow-up. Were they trying to get like UNESCO World Heritage Site designation for part of it?
Well, they already have it designated as a World Monuments Fund site. Okay. So that's already been done. And that can open the door up for something like UNESCO funding or more input from the federal level, you know, more leverage. And that was interesting. They were letting everybody know, even archivists, librarians, people who were heads of state associations and business owners. They had business owners give talks about how their businesses continually run or are profitable based on European tourists or domestic tourists who want to experience a diner, a traditional blue plate special, for example. And I guess they were trying to just get everybody together to realize that, wow, there's a lot going on the route. Boy, if we just knew everybody who was kind of doing this and collaborated together, we could probably do more systematic good things.
Yeah, and you've hit upon something there. In interviewing the business owners and over the course of these 10 years, a lot of them say, we don't even know what others are doing in other parts along the route. Because I've always asked them, why don't you guys collaborate? Why don't you have some sort of chamber of commerce, if you will, along the entire route? And the answers I get are, we don't have the luxury of time. I said, why don't you have a little convention among just all the business owners to do? Like, I'm running a small business. I don't have time and resources to go to these meetings and do academics like the, you know.
You haven't touched on, that's one of the problems. Everybody, all of them are independent. And communities or whatever, they are only interested in their 5 miles. When the daughter was helping with the railhead, she would try to tell people, well, you need to stop and see this in Oklahoma or that, and work together. There is a system that, like Dave said, people, well, why are you taking a picture of my house? There are people that don't want to work together, and you've got to overcome that. There's a place here in this state that if you stop to take a picture, they've been known to come out and get a gun and run you off, and they're supposed to be open for business. So, you know, they don't help themselves. And that's the thinking you've got to overcome, and as long as some of the current owners are there, you're never going to overcome it.
I want to shift just a little bit, because I did want to ask, we didn't really touch too much upon the work the two of them are doing with the African American Oral History Project.
Yeah.
Do you have a certain number of people that you're interested in?
Yeah, and by the way, that oral history project came out of the Anaheim conference, because they had a great speaker who talked about the fact that here Nat King Cole could sing about a road that he probably couldn't travel very well himself due to the fact that he was African American. And so what we decided to do was leverage the ideas that came out of that conference into a project. And what we were trying to do is target African Americans, Hispanic. We don't have many Native Americans in this community, but we have identified some with Tommy and Glenda's help, actually. And that's the thing. That conference, we had representatives from Springfield, from the city, from the Chamber of Commerce, you and Glenda. We had the guy from the state park up there near St. Louis. Yeah. I was there, and I think there was one other person.
Amy, that was head of tourism.
Yeah.
And she's quit.
Okay.
She's gone.
But all of us then came back to Springfield, and then we kept going with it. We kept rolling with it. And so the strength of that application was that we were able to get the city to sign a letter, Tommy signed a letter. Everybody was jumping on board, including John Bradbury up there in Raleigh. And you know, that's the thing. It depends if there's a monetary benefit. I think the communities are willing to join in on doing something to kind of preserve the root or develop it. But the African American project that we have, the Black oral histories that we're trying to do, are trying to look at a different aspect of it, because the Anaheim conference really pointed out that, well, maybe some other people didn't have a positive experience, and that's why they don't care about the root, you know. And I don't think we've discovered that the road was a bad experience, but it was like a highway that we had to travel. We did it because it was the only route to go from here to Joplin. And there were some places along it that were not safe because it was a sharp turn and there was no guardrails. Or it wasn't safe for sadder reasons, and that is it was a sundowner community. They were expected to be out of that county before the sun was down. And so, and they all, you know, and there's some interesting anecdotes that are coming out of these oral histories. And the main ones, I mean, I think it's a little too early to be definitive on any of these, but number one, it was the only route we had, and we had to plan it out. We took our own lunches. It was safer to go from Springfield to St. Louis than it was to Joplin. Going out west was not as pleasant of an experience because of the problems that might occur along that route. And that it was just a road. It was just a road. And now, they liked the Nat King Cole song. I mean, they did, but that wasn't the main thing. It was because, well, we have a basketball game out there, and we're going to go out there and play the game. We're all getting the bus and go, or we all go in cars, actually, and go down and travel down to Joplin to play the game and come back. So, or it was, we sang with the Philharmonics, and so we would use the route to travel. And one of the things we noticed was Route 66 wasn't as easy to travel as the roads going down to the south, because segregation had lodgings, accommodations, and food in place for African Americans, because it was a separate but equal situation. So those are kind of the broad things that we're finding.
Now, so you've done about, what you said, 14, 15 oral histories, and are you going to continue the project? Or
yes, what we decided to do, we're gonna finish up the 20 that we're obligated that we want to do, but we're finding this is so successful, we're going to keep going as much as we can. The challenge will be finding, Springfield doesn't have a very high African American population. The percentage of it is not as high as other Midwest communities. But we are going to continue it on. We think it's definitely good. And we're going to keep, you know, I mean, the Route 66 Association, they're doing their oral history project too.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you guys. Here, both of you, here at the university, how many Route 66 specific oral histories are housed here in your
Okay,
collection?
so
We've done about 30,
right,
You and Jerry have done 30?
yeah,
and,
Are they here at this library?
yeah, well, Dave Dunaway,
Mhm.
when he did it, he went to each state and has an official depository of the oral histories.
He has them in New Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, and MSU is the official one for the state. At that time, Mark Stoddard was up there at, what was the name of it, that he actually wasn't with the Raleigh, he was with MU.
Okay.
And that office was there. And they put duplicates
Okay.
of ours, all right? Then what put so many here was Ozark Public Television's here, and we did, Skip Curtis kept after them, and they started a documentary of Route 66 in this state. Well, Skip got sick and couldn't continue with it, and I was helping him and Tom Carter. And part of the deal was that the interviews, they were not just video, they were audio too, to do the deal, that when they got done, they would put all of that material over here also.
so we have the outtakes.
So they have everything from that, and I talked to Tom, it's been probably first of the year, and he said he was thinking that they had so much, had a lot they didn't use, and then since that was done, a lot of the people that was in that has passed away. So he said they were thinking about going back, reviewing what they hadn't used,
Okay.
and doing a volume 2. And I said, well, and then you could add, because, well, you're talking this, like, recording, the association started in, officially, their charter in 90. We've been around 25 years. So, there were a lot of things that was around 25 years ago, businesses and people, that's gone. And we didn't record them, we didn't do anything. So I think hindsight's always better than foresight. I think now we're seeing that what's going on now, what's transpired in the last 25 years up until now, we should be recording, because in 25 more years,
Right.
it will have changed again, and you're getting it firsthand. You can do it firsthand now where
Yeah.
you don't have that luxury.
But then that raises the question, then how are you gonna go about doing it? Because you, as you all know, it's labor intensive, you gotta travel, et cetera. So, the 15 that you guys have done so far, and the 30-something that you've done, and do you know of anybody else in Missouri that's actively collecting?
I think the association and us are the primary ones right now. I don't know if Jeff Corrigan up at Columbia is doing anything with Route 66. I don't think he is.
I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, but you know what, that's, I know that we're committed, being part of ARC, we are committed to going ahead and continuing this project into the future, and it's going to be a commitment that we're willing to do. And I think the way archives and special collections and academic institutions are these days with limited funds, that's what it's got to be. I mean, I don't see every university along the route being able to devote all this time and energy to it. And so fortunately, I think MSU is in a position, and I think also the State Historical Society, which is John works for. If we can partner up with them, we can at least take care of this for the foreseeable future.
Okay.
Well, when this started, the oral histories and everything, and then like the state scenic byway, to get that done took a lot of time in the oral histories. Well, on the interviews, when you go in and you find somebody and you want to interview them, you say, would you like to do an oral history? Well, a lot of people really aren't that interested. But then you say, well, because they don't really know what you're going to do, and say, well, you explain to them that where these are kept is over at MSU in their library, and they will be for future reference and all, and you explain to them you have to sign a release and such as that, and we don't need some of your, you know, we don't need your bank account such as that, but we, you know,
Yeah.
and we did one, and Jerry was the gentleman that was involved with Camel 66. And before we ever started, then Jerry explained to him, if we ask a question because of the circumstances of Camel 66, just say, I do not want to answer, or something. We're not going to pry. If you don't feel right about answering our questions, just say so, and we'll just move on to something else and all. And we didn't ask questions about, you know, what happened there at the end and such as that. And when we got done and was finished, I'd heard him give this talk about it. And then when we interviewed him and all, he said, well, he was apprehensive about this because he's afraid we'd ask him something that involved the legalities of it at the end. And he said, I said, we told you we wasn't digging for dirt. We just wanted history about him, and his dad had a trucking company, and Frank Camel bought him out, and he worked there as a kid and stayed there after he got out of college. And I said, that's all we want. We don't want anything that's in the closet. If it is in the closet, we're not interested in that deal. And when we got done, I told him, I said, I've got cards and I rented from Frank Camel's sister-in-law, and I said, I knew everything that was going on because one of his daughters called her once a week and told her what was going on and everything. And he said, oh, well, what do you know? And we went to talking, and he said, I told him a thing or two, and he said, well, then you do know. And I said, I went to school with the youngest girl, and I said, I know. He said, well, you could ask me some questions I wouldn't want to answer. And I said, I wouldn't want to do that because we know we weren't.
Yeah, I'm sure you've come across, people will tell you things and then we're just like, all right, we're keeping this, you know, in confidence, as you do this.
Or Jerry told him, he said, now, if you answer something and you want to take it back, he said, we'll just go back and play it. And he said, we'll just record over it. And he said, if you say something and then you think about it, just say, hey, I'd as soon not have that on the record. And he said, we'll take care of it for you.
Well, here's a question for both of you. Have you transcribed all the 30 that you've done, and have you transcribed all yours yet?
All the ones for the project, we are going to transcribe. We've already got, I think, 2 or 3 in the pipeline. The goal will be eventually to transcribe all the ones, because one of the things is researchers, if they find out it's not transcribed, they're not going to use it.
No, nobody wants to sit there and listen or watch the video.
Exactly.
We want words.
So yeah, transcriptions, that has to be done for all of these to be really useful. The other thing too that we've been doing is using the camera to record these and put them on YouTube. And that's the, you know, I think that's kind of been the more interesting aspect of this round of oral histories, is how much we've been using the video camera.
Oh, I think you're fairly unique in that regard.
And there's debates on that. I mean, I think there's some interviewees who are conscious of it, and it kind of holds them back a little bit. But and I don't know if we'll always do that with some of these, but that's certainly been part of the grant, was to say that these will be up on YouTube.
Yeah.
So most of the interviews
they're accessible. And it adds another layer to see people's facial expressions.
And you can get a transcript on YouTube, but they're not really accurate. Yeah, they're kind of sketchy.
Well, me and Jerry found out, and Dave Winkler, that's another teacher that was up there with Jerry, and he's coming with Jerry to learn. So if he had one up in St. Louis area, Jerry said, you won't have to drive up there. But anyway, a lot of these interviews we've done, it's kind of interesting, you know, after you talk to the people. Well, Jerry also was involved in photography and everything, and he'll take, if they had pictures, he will take pictures of family, I mean, they'll dig out stacks of family photographs, and he'll take them and put them all on a disc, just the pictures, and then the disc of the interview and everything, and put it in a deal. And he says, well, David Dunaway, at one of the festivals, he wanted us to show some of the other people what they needed, and Jerry got this out, and then they had it where he could show the photographs. We got done, and Dunaway was giving this presentation, and he told me and Jerry, said, you guys can go on. And I said, well, we're just gonna watch. And he said, you guys already know how it's done.
Yeah.
And he said, you don't have to listen to me. And I said, Jerry said, well, we want to. We might learn something. He said, no, he said, just go on. He said,
And it just dawned on me as we're talking about photos. He escaped before I could get his photo, because what I've been doing is, you know, photographing you guys as well. So I'll get the two of you and I'll have to tell him for asking.
just put it on your page.
Send me evidence. We'll Photoshop them in. There'll be like 3 heads on one body or something.
Tell them to do a selfie.
Yeah.
Smartphone.
All right. Do you guys have any questions for me in terms of what this is all about?
So what is the project that you're working on?
It's
What's the one that, yeah.
the main. We're probably going to end up doing 2 books on this. One more, how can I put this, more sociological treatise, a little more critical of, you know, some of the things we've discussed here today on it. But the one that we're working on right now is oral histories that are going to be grouped into 6 different categories. We've got the artists and the musicians, the business owners, the international travelers, domestic travelers, and then you guys that have been going on this trip are the preservationists.
Oh,
People that are, you know,
That sounds good.
to try to, again, paint a whole picture of what this is about. And it's not going to be, you know, we don't want a coffee table type book like Wickline and the others who take the photographs and all this. This is, you know, this is more, we want to hear the stories, but then we want to infuse it with some analysis and some themes, as you're pointing out.
That is something that's sorely needed.
Yeah, I mean,
some really in-depth, from various disciplines,
Yeah.
some good.
and it's not to despair. I mean, everybody's collecting. It's important to preserve and collect, and that's why.
Right.
But then it's a matter of saying now, okay, what do we do with this, and go from there. And so that's what the project is right now. And I've had a little grant to come out here for these 7 days and visit a bunch of the ARC centers. And I met with Sean Evans, and I met with Dunaway in previous iterations. The only one I haven't been to is, what is it, the Autry or whatever, out in California. I haven't been.
Marva Fetchland, they've got a great collection out there, and they had that exhibit that was there, that was outstanding.
It was like, what, a year or 2 ago?
It was, I think, a year ago, but it was only for like 9 months or something.
Okay.
But it was just outstanding, it really was. Hopefully they can do that again at some point in the future. But yeah, they've got some significant holdings, it really is.
And what's interesting is that it seems like all these repositories have various things, but they're cataloged different. You know, Sean Evans and I were talking, they're cataloged and organized and indexed differently.
Right.
And so we talk about a national, you know, how hard it is to get a national association or a national museum. Well, the same thing with what we're all doing with interviews and oral histories and whatnot. Everybody's got their own little idiosyncratic ways. Are you guys familiar with Dennis Casimir out in Goffs, California? Dennis in the Mojave.
Oh.
He's got a wonderful little museum there where he's done hundreds of oral histories.
And needles?
Yes. Yeah. And Goffs, Needles there. No, not Needles. I'm sorry, Goffs.
Oh, okay.
Near Essex, Amboy, out in that way. Fascinating collection of oral histories, and he's had them all transcribed and bound and
That's great.
But he's
So
had an
where's
army
he
of
going-
volunteers.
Where is he going to deposit those?
I think he set up a trust,
Okay.
actually, once he passes,
Yeah.
it'll be there in
Well,
perpetuity.
what was interesting when David Dunaway was here, when we was talking about MSU,
Mhm.
we happened to mention to him, he said, well, he liked to go around the country and find where all the oral histories were. And wife happened to mention to him, said, well, was he aware that Evangel College over here had an extensive oral history? And he said, here? And she said, yeah. And he said, no. And he said, and at that time, we knew the woman that was over at the library over there. And she's since retired and passed away. But he sent us an email after he got back. And he said he went over there and talked to her. Didn't really get to look, but he would be back just to see what was in there. He realized it probably wasn't Route 66, but he liked to know where all such as that was. So there might be something there that you'd be looking for.
Yeah.
And next time I saw him, I said, well, how was it? He said, wasn't even aware that existed. And he said, it's really,
No. It all depends on the archivist, how you catalog and
Yeah.
index this stuff.
And-
Or even market it and
It's-
outreach, yeah, there's some archives that are kind of holed up in places that no one knows about.